Mario Cristobal's staff is now complete because the Miami Hurricanes have just stolen an assistant coach from the Florida Gators.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Friday. We made it. And happy Valentine's Day. I am Alex Donno, University of Miami alumnus, co-host of Locked On ACC, and writer for Canes County at Rivals. And thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts, free on YouTube, and we're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. On this episode, we'll talk about a prominent college football media member offering praise for Carson Beck and what that means for Miami's QB1 heading into the 2025 season. Mario Cristobal's coaching staff, it's now complete, and with a few weeks to spare before spring football opens up on March 3rd. So we got the band completely together now, and the reason why that coaching staff is now complete is because as reports started coming out on Thursday night, and this is happening, Miami is poaching Florida Gators defensive secondary coach Will Harris. I think this is a big move. Poaching Harris to bring him from Gainesville down to Coral Gables, which is quite an upgrade, as we all know. And this is truly a big time hire, and there's a lot of angles to cover here with Will Harris. And I'm tempted to start with the recruiting angles, but let me start with in Coach Harris's 1 year at Florida, spent the 2024 season on Billy Napier's staff. They improved from 23 to 24 in so many important statistical categories in the defensive secondary. They improved in pass breakups. They were plus 12 from the season prior, plus 11 in interceptions from the season before, and plus 18 in turnovers gained from the season before. Will Harris comes in with a solid resume as well. He coached the DBs at Florida last year, and prior to his short stint at UF, he was an assistant defensive backs coach for the Los Angeles Chargers. So he's got that NFL experience. We always love, as Miami hired Damian Lewis earlier in the week to the defensive line coaching staff. He's got that NFL experience, having coached at the Seattle Seahawks. You get someone else with NFL experience, and Will Harris having worked with the Chargers. Harris has also been the defensive coordinator at Georgia Southern, so he does have coordinating experience. Defensive backs coach for the Washington Huskies, where he did a really good job. And yeah, what really excites me, and we'll circle back to the on-field coaching in a second, because there's another angle about Will Harris that really excites me. But guys, from a recruiting point of view, I love this. Coach Harris has done solid work there. You look at the DB class that Florida just signed for the class of 2025, really, really good, including him being the primary recruiter for Ben Hanks Jr., who Florida beat Miami for, Hilton Drake Stubbs, who Florida flipped from Miami, and Lagonza Hayward. All three of those were top 15 defensive backs in the class of 2025, with Will Harris serving as the primary recruiter. I also really like Onis Conanbani, who was another excellent defensive back that was signed to that class. And, obviously for the 2025 guys, they're, signed with Florida, and I assume that they're probably going to stay there, although I'm getting questions from Miami fans like, hey, do you think we can pull Stubbs and Hanks back? I don't know. But I will look to 2026 guys, because Will Harris, primary recruiter for one, Jalen Seatbelt Waters, one of the top cornerbacks in the class of 2026, who's verbally committed to Florida. Now, even prior to this Harris move, Mr. Waters has been strongly rumored as a possible Miami Hurricanes flip from Florida to Miami. So I would imagine that adding Will Harris to Miami staff might seal the deal there, that Jalen Waters out of Armwood High School, which is becoming an important pipeline to Miami from the Tampa area. I mean, Miami got Kellen Wiley and Gerard Pringle from Armwood in 2025. They might be able to seal the deal and flip Jalen Waters in the 2026 class. And going back to the on-field coaching, You're going to see people talking about this a lot, guys, over the next couple weeks before spring football begins at Miami. But Will Harris he's the ultimate example of a hands-on coach, because there have been coaches over the years. I've really enjoyed watching them, like the way that they practice with their group and with their players. And Will Harris literally takes hits in practice from his fully padded players. That's something he has done. I don't think he does that every practice necessarily, but Will Harris will literally take hits from fully padded players in practice. I cannot wait come March 3rd to go out there and watch Coach Harris in that role. And what is that role exactly going to be, at least to the best of our understanding, right? Because, this is our educated estimate on how this is going to work. So Harris, of course, Miami has 2 defensive backs coaches. They hired Zach Etheridge a couple of weeks ago. You add Will Harris. Harris is expected to work with the safeties primarily. Coach Etheridge is going to focus on the cornerbacks. So Harris, safeties, Etheridge, cornerbacks. And Miami's also going to have some help because, remember, analysts are allowed to do hands-on coaching now as well. Miami recently hired well-respected defensive back analyst Terry Jefferson, who can assist both of them. So Miami's going to have a good staff coaching the defensive backs, with Will Harris primarily working with the safeties. That's our understanding of the role that he's going to play. And another important question is, because everyone's going to wonder, well, okay, how come he left Florida for Miami? Like, did they not want him there? Did they nudge him out? No, my understanding, this is not someone that Florida wanted to lose, that he was very well liked up there in Gainesville. Talking to a couple of different, Florida insiders, including our buddy Brandon from Locked On Gators. I think the issue there was that Harris did not get along with the Gators defensive coordinator. So because of that, he opened himself up to a change of scenery. Now, one of the reasons why I think, Harris to Miami is an excellent fit. And of course, listen, from a Miami point of view, this is an excellent football coach, excellent recruiter. But one of the reasons why Miami is such a good fit for Harris is he already has relationships built with so many of the same high schools and a lot of the same players that Miami is already recruiting. So his big recruiting board, all the relationships he has all over the state of Florida, like from Jacksonville on down, Florida recruits so many of the same players that Miami recruits, and they have relationships with so many of those same high schools, from Mandarin down to Southridge, all the same relationships. So it really does fit like a glove from a recruiting point of view for Coach Harris to leave Florida and come to Miami. So we'll talk about now the complete Miami Hurricanes coaching staff, because Cristobal has all of his on-field assistants. Both of his coordinators are completely set in stone, which is nice, because you remember we talked about this a couple of years ago, when Kevin Beard was added to Miami's staff. That was 2 off seasons ago. That one happened like a couple days before spring football started. So you really kind of got that one down to the wire to get your staff complete. This time, we've got some breathing room here. We'll take a look at what Miami's staff looks like, and also want to take a look at some really encouraging words by a prominent college football analyst about Carson Beck and what Miami's new QB1 is going to bring to the table. So you want to keep it locked right here. We're only getting started on a new Locked On Canes. Guys, I am loving the nutrition and the convenience I get with Factor. If you're looking to optimize your nutrition this year, Factor makes eating well easy with chef-prepared, dietitian-approved meals that are fresh, never frozen, and ready to heat and eat in just 2 minutes. With 40 options across 8 dietary preferences every week, you can customize your meals to fit your lifestyle, whether it's Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, or Keto Plus. Factor even offers wholesome smoothies, breakfasts, and grab-and-go snacks to keep you fueled all day long. I love how Factor takes the stress out of meal planning. I recently tried their Calorie Smart, part of my New Year's resolution. They were packed with flavor. They kept me full throughout the day. Guys, the convenience is unbeatable. No prep, no mess, just great food in minutes. Eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/LockedOnCollege50 off and use code LockedOnCollege50 off to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code LOCKEDONCollege50 off at factormeals.com/LOCKEDONCollege50 off to get 50% off plus shipping on your first box at Factor Meals. Welcome, Will Harris, and thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. For your next listen, make sure you check out Locked On ACC. Kenton Gibbs and I have a great time taking you through the conference, basketball, football news, conference realignment, rumors, debunked, all of that good stuff available free wherever you get your podcasts and available free on YouTube. All right, so we have both sides of the football, defensive coaching staff complete. Offensive coaching staff, the same, but also complete. So on defense, Corey Hetherman, new. Miami hired him away from Minnesota. He's your new defensive coordinator and linebackers coach. He's expected to fill both of those roles. And of course, Hetherman with the Golden Gophers last year did a tremendous job improving that defense. I mean, they were, 69th ranked defense in the country before he got there. He got them into the top 5 in one season. He comes to Miami. He's also going to coach the linebackers. Derek Nicholson left Miami for Missouri. And, I think Hetherman is going to bring just a lot more aggression and hopefully more discipline to the defense, because I think the defense was really lacking discipline from a coaching point of view a year ago. Miami has, of course, Zach Etheridge, who's going to focus on the cornerbacks. Now Will Harris from Florida, who's going to focus on the safeties. Jason Taylor, who's going to focus on the edge rushers, and Damian Lewis. And guys, if you missed our episode earlier this week, it was either Tuesday or Wednesday. It was Tuesday when we covered the Damian Lewis hire. I think that was a fantastic move for Miami as well. They poached him away from Colorado. Lewis, of course, is a Miami alum, was a high-level defensive lineman, first-round draft pick in 2012 overall pick. He's got an excellent coaching resume as well. I think that was a tremendous move. He's coaching the defensive tackle. So that's the defensive side of the football. On offense, you guys tell me if you like it on offense or if you think there maybe could have been some tweaks. Because from my point of view, you have the number one offense in the country last year. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? And obviously I know that there were certain players, like the guy who wore the jersey number 1 last year, who probably had a lot to do with the offense being number 1. But I saw no reason to really tinker with the offensive staff. I like it the way it is. I'm glad they have continuity, because I think continuity is important. You, of course, bring back Shannon Dawson as your offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach. And keeping Dawson, I think, is big, because I don't know how serious it ever got with other places, but we did see Dawson linked with a couple of other jobs during the offseason, never really went anywhere, so I'm glad Shannon Dawson is back. Alex Mirabal coaching the offensive line. We absolutely want him back every single year. He does a tremendous job. Cody Woodall coaching the tight ends. I mean, Miami's tight end room had a great year last year. Elijah Arroyo is potentially going to be a first-round pick, maybe a second-round pick, but he's raised his draft stock a lot. You've got Matt Merritt coaching the running backs. Miami's running back room had a good year last year. Damian Martinez is gone, but you return Mark Fletcher and Jordan Lyle, and that unit is expected to have a really good year coming up. And you get Kevin Beard back to coach your wide receivers for, this will be his 3rd year back at Miami. And this was another one, I don't know how far it ever got, but Beard, there were always some few rumblings in the offseason, is an NFL team going to poach Beard away? Is he going to take a different job? I'm really glad that KB is back, because I think he's one of the most valuable members of this staff. And so I really think that continuity is great. Now, I know that one thing a lot of folks will maybe rightfully look at, now you have a finite number of on-field coaching spots, right? So Miami's staff is technically full, although analysts are allowed to coach on the field now. So it's a gray area. But in terms of the official on-field staff, the staff is full. But I know some people will look at this and say, Donno, don't we need a full-time special teams coach? Which is not as common as it used to be. A lot of staffs don't have a dedicated on-field special teams coach. Miami does not. And I know folks will rightfully say, hey, kick return game, punt return game was vanilla to bad last couple of years. Wouldn't it be nice to have a dedicated special teams coach? I understand that. Miami has chosen instead of that to have two coaches for certain position groups instead of having a full-time special teams coach. They do have analysts who really help fill that role, in practice. So we'll see. I still think the special teams can improve even without technically having a dedicated special teams coach. But if anyone brings that up, I understand, because that's a unit where I hope to see a guy like Malachi Toney maybe get work as a kick or punt returner this year. Nye Carr, who I think has potential as a returner. He seems to enjoy doing that kind of stuff. And of course, Ray Joseph, maybe he can get a little bit more traction on punt returns this year. But yeah, I mean, Miami's kick and punt return game, it lacks. So we need to really try to get that popping this year. It's sticking with that Miami coaching staff for a second. I thought this was cool. Andy Staples from On3 Sports, who's a really good college football analyst. He rated Miami hiring Corey Hetherman as one of the most impactful offseason hires in college football. He says Hetherman's defense was spectacular in his only season at Minnesota. The Golden Gophers finished 12th in the nation in yards per play allowed at 4.8 and 9th in points per game allowed at 16.9. Hetherman joined the Gophers after 2 seasons as Greg Schiano's linebackers coach at Rutgers. The prior 2 seasons, he was Curt Cignetti's DC at James Madison. The time spent with Schiano is important, he writes. Schiano is one of Miami coach Mario Cristobal's mentors, and a coach who can work successfully with one likely will mesh well with the other. That's a great point. And also, Schiano being able to vouch for Hetherman, I'm sure went a long way with Cristobal making that move. Miami's defense probably cost the Hurricanes a college football playoff berth last season, which is why Cristobal had to make a change at DC. The defense probably will have to be better this year. Absolutely it will be, because the offense might take a step back after losing Cam Ward and star receiver Xavier Restrepo. I want to circle back to that in a second. But in terms of Miami's coaching moves, I talked about this earlier this week before the staff was even complete. Now that Miami's got Will Harris and the staff is complete, this is another one where I think you've upgraded from last season, right? Where your defensive back coaching last year had Lance Guidry coaching the safeties and Chevis Jackson coaching the corners. I believe having Will Harris with the safeties, Zach Etheridge with the corners. I think that's an upgrade. It definitely should be an upgrade from a recruiting standpoint. So I think Miami's done really well there. Defensive line coaching, you get Jason Taylor back, and you've got Damian Lewis, who I think can be an upgrade over Joe Salavea. I think that's absolutely an upgrade there. I'm hoping and expecting Hetherman as defensive coordinator to be an upgrade from Lance Guidry, because the lack of adjustments last year I thought was inexcusable in a lot of ways. So yeah, I believe your offensive staff, you get the continuity, which is important, but the defense, which was not pulling their weight last year, I think you've added clear upgrades. So Mario Cristobal's staff has gotten better. Like Cristobal, I think, can take a bow because he's done a good job getting this staff up to par. Now, I want to talk a little bit about Carson Beck on the other side. And Andy Staples mentioned Miami not only losing Cam Ward, but losing Xavier Restrepo. That's an interesting angle, right? Because, bigger shoes to fill than a lot of people realize. So I want to talk about Carson Beck. I want to talk about replacing Restrepo and what that might look like this year. And where does Miami stand with one of their most important recruiting targets for the class of 2026? You want to keep it locked right here. We're not done yet on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip-off, or if you want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whether I'm backing my team for a late game rally or picking up a player to hit a clutch 3, I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thank you for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. Make sure you also check out Locked On College Football. Spencer McLaughlin does an awesome job taking you through all the big offseason storylines, available free wherever you get your podcasts and available free on YouTube. So Andy Staples brought up something there, when talking about, hey, how much of a step back will Miami's offense take? We've talked, for weeks, ever since Miami added Carson Beck, who's, one of the better quarterbacks in the country, that Miami did probably the best they could have possibly done in replacing Cam Ward. Okay. Losing Xavier Restrepo, though, that's, you think about what a staple he was, especially the last 2 seasons on Miami's offense. And, being Miami's top receiver this past year, being Mr. Reliable for Cam Ward, just as he was Mr. Reliable for Tyler Van Dyke prior to that. One of the great all-time Canes, leading Miami receiver. I think that's going to be one of the spots to really watch in spring football and fall camp is the development of Nathaniel Ray Joseph, who is the next man up, right? Ray has been on the squad for the past couple of years. He's been Restrepo's backup. Obviously has not, produced the sort of numbers and consistency that Restrepo, try to compare anybody to Restrepo. It's tough, man. I mean, he was Mr. Everything down here, but from Ray Joseph, how much can he step up and grab that opportunity? And if for whatever reason he can't, he's going to have some young guys breathing down his neck. Malachi Toney. I mentioned Toney is someone to possibly be a breakout guy in the return game, kicks or punts. But Toney is also going to be someone who's going to be on that depth chart, potentially climbing up that depth chart as a slot receiver, even as a true freshman. Now, I know Toney is young. He graduated high school early, to come to Miami as not only an early enrollee, but a year and a half early enrollee because he reclassified from 26 to 25. But he's got the physical maturity, I think, already to contribute year one, right? Will he be at his very best the first year? Maybe not, but Toney is someone to watch out for. And I'm not sleeping on Dalen Upshaw either as a true freshman coming in. So, Miami's going to, and maybe it ends up being kind of a collective to try and, fill up some of that Xavier Restrepo production. But that's going to be a big one in terms of Carson Beck, coming in as Miami's new QB1. JD Pickell from On3 Sports, I thought had a really good, passionate monologue on, standing up for Carson Beck. Because I know it, and it's funny because, coming off of the 2023 season when Beck had, that year, a better offensive line, more productive running game, and he had pass catchers like Brock Bowers and Ladd McConkey, when he had protection and had more talent around him, Beck's stock coming off of that 23 season in Georgia was soaring, right? Heisman front runner, possible first round pick. And then 2024, he didn't have a lot of that stuff around him that he had the previous year. And the numbers dipped maybe accordingly. And Georgia also, I think, had the toughest schedule in the country last year. And then some folks out there are acting like Beck is chopped liver, right? But I thought J.D. Pickell made some good points in Carson Beck's defense. He said Beck at one point in time was the far and away favorite to be the number 1 pick and potentially Heisman Trophy winner, he said on his show, The Hard Count on On3. Then the 2024 season happens and must not be that good, fell off was the narrative, right? Pickell says that, quote, he talked about losing weapons like Ladd McConkey and Brock Bowers, and the team was ranked 102nd in rushing. They couldn't take pressure off the passing game. He says that made it more difficult a task for him to repeat the year he had in 2023. He did throw Beck through 12 interceptions last year. He said, when you can't run the football and receivers aren't great hanging on to the football, when you throw to them, I'd press a little too, he says. Adding that Georgia wasn't able to cater to Beck's strengths as a downfield passer with their personnel. He acknowledged, this according to On3 Sports, that Beck left things to be desired with his play at Georgia in 2024, but also says the change of scenery to Miami can help his psyche. He says, quote, a little more low profile, less attention. That's exactly what Carson Beck needs, a chance to breathe a little bit. That's not knocking Georgia with a smaller town feel, more intense area attention. Just sometimes things run their course there. And, it's so interesting because as South Florida sports fans, and I've covered every team in South Florida during my career. I've covered, obviously, the Canes, the Dolphins, the Florida Panthers, the Miami Heat, Marlins, if that's still a thing, and so on. You don't usually talk about South Florida as, hey, like, you get less attention here, right? You come to Miami and you get less attention, but when you go from Georgia football, the epicenter of the SEC and the epicenter of the college football universe for, many of the past 5 or 6 years, he's not wrong. I mean, you have less of a spotlight from a college football point of view in Miami, Florida, than you do in Athens, Georgia. So it's a weird thing to think about because, Miami's one of the bigger cities in the country and, a metropolitan center. But yeah, it's definitely less of a spotlight in Miami. And he added the SEC with the defenses he had to play against, not knocking the ACC, but I don't think it will be a more difficult task in general, Piquel said. I think he's going to have a pretty good transition. Carson Beck, he's a good quarterback. I think he's a top 10 quarterback, top 5 quarterback even going into next season. I love this fit. I love where he's going to be at Miami. Ultimately, the Canes in 2025 can be right back in the mix to win the ACC in the college football playoffs. And grabbing a guy like Carson Beck is a massive reason why that's the case. And so I love it. And let's not forget, if not for the elbow injury that he suffered in that SEC championship game, Beck would probably be following through with his NFL draft plan. Probably would be in the draft, but it benefits him to come back to college for a final year because of that elbow injury, which I know it's going to cost him spring football here, likely, which is unfortunate. But had he kept his declaration for the NFL, that would cost him combine, cost him pro day, would hurt his draft stock. So if not for that elbow, Beck would probably be on his way to the NFL. Instead, Miami gets to enjoy him for a season. So I love that. Something from a recruiting point of view, saw this on 24/7 Sports from Brian Doan, who's one of their national recruiting analysts. And he does mention, and I've got my fingers crossed on this one, about 6'5", 4-star uncommitted wide receiver Calvin Russell, who, of course, is Miami Northwestern, someone Miami really covets. In fact, you probably put Calvin Russell into that like Derek Cooper, Jason Lopez type of category. These are like must-get type of recruits that you can't let another top local wide receiver leave town. This is someone Miami really wants. And, for what it's worth, Brian Doan at 24/7, he does consider Miami to be the front runner. He says some prospects are already committed, others are trimming lists and setting visits. And then there is Russell, who is closer to the beginning than the end of his recruitment because he's in basketball season. He's a big-time basketball player, and he's a key figure for a strong Miami Northwestern team. So making football recruiting visits has not been a priority, and in most instances not possible because of his schedule. In fact, I think he had planned on coming to junior day at Miami, but couldn't because of a basketball game. He told 24/7 Sports nothing is set in stone when the visit window opens in early March, but he added basketball is almost to the end, so it should be planned out soon. When it comes to his recruitment, Doan says Miami sits in the best spot because of his familiarity with the school and his ability to visit since the campus is less than 12 miles from his high school. His mom, Chenevia Broussard, who played basketball for the Hurricanes in the early 2000s, she's in the school Sports Hall of Fame. So he grew up learning about the school. In addition to basketball, he runs track, and he will spend a lot of time in the spring doing that, which will take away from his time to visit. This guy's like a 3-sport or maybe a 10-sport athlete. Miami should be involved until the end, but the real intrigue is when or if he makes some of the most lengthy visits to places like Oregon, Auburn, and Syracuse. He already made it to Syracuse last March, and getting back to campus is vital as other programs up their efforts to recruit him. So interesting one to watch because, again, Calvin Russell, and I know, basketball is also involved. Like, he might even try to be a 2-sport athlete at the college he goes to, but it's certainly, as we've talked about a lot of recruits the last few days here on Locked On Canes. That's someone 6'5", 190-pound Miami legacy at wide receiver that we would love to grab. We'll keep tabs on him for sure. Welcome Will Harris to the U. Guys, make sure you smash that thumbs up button, hit the like button, subscribe to Locked On Canes. Make sure you subscribe to the audio version on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your pods. I hope everyone has an awesome weekend and an awesome Valentine's Day coming up. And we'll talk to you next time on another episode of Locked On Canes. We are part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.